Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. And thank you for getting around the challenges with parking and all today. I want to just say a few things about the program and our speaker. I'll read you something from Living Lightly that is a brief definition of what a rain garden is, and you'll learn a lot of that in more detail. A shallow, bowl-shaped landscape full of native plants that collects and filters stormwater runoff. And if you think about it, that is something that forests and porous soil have done naturally for millennia. So today, we've got a lot of hard surfaces that allow quick water runoff, and the water will pick up oil, pesticides, fertilizers along the way. So that's one of the issues we have in modern times. And here at the lake, we have steep sloped yards and a need to constantly dredge silt that is washed out of our yards into the lake. So that makes it we thought a good topic for the lake and for our committee, and it looks like those of you sitting out there agreed. So with that, our speaker is Mary Eiserman, who is a conservation technician with the Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District. Mary, and I'll borrow this from their website. Mary joined the team in August 2016. Mary's passion for discovery and the natural world led her to major in biology at Christopher Newport University. Following graduation, Mary worked as an independent contractor for several wind energy companies before switching to a more agricultural path. Her experience working on several farms led Mary to work with the Rodale Organic Architectural Institute in Pennsylvania, leading to no-till weed management studies. Mary and her husband are Nelson County residents. She is a self-described naturalist, working for the last several years as an event designer and coordinator. Mary is excited to be jumping back into the agricultural world and is looking forward to working with area producers. So with that, I give Mary Eiserman.
Thank you. I think I could update that bio a little bit because I've been working with the district for a little over a year and a half now, and I'm glad to be doing so. Glad to have left the world of private events a little bit behind for now. I was going to do a brief introduction of myself, but I think you pretty much covered it, so thank you, and thank you all for coming today. I do work for the Thomas Jefferson Soil Water Conservation District. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are a resource for landowners in Albemarle, Nelson, Fluvanna, and Louisa counties. And what we do, and there's a number of us employed at the district, and what we do is we work to funnel state grant money to you, the landowners, to put conservation on the ground. This is for agriculture, and we do have a new program for what we call urban homeowners, and that's not necessarily an urban development, but places like here at Lake Monticello where you have stormwater issues that are impacting your water quality. What we want to do to help that. One of the things we can do is rain gardens, so I'm thrilled to be here tonight and be talking to you about that. I'm going to start by giving a little brief history of the soil water conservation districts. Then we're going to talk about water quality, all that impervious surface and how it affects our water quality. We're going to talk about how rain gardens can help with that. We're going to talk about how to construct a rain garden, how to find a place for a rain garden. They're not always the right solution, but where they are, they can be great. We're also going to touch just a little bit on biodiversity. This is a wildlife group, so rain gardens can be really great habitats to encourage pollinators, and pollinators are the fellows that drive our whole systems. So, we do a lot of outreach, we do a lot of agricultural work, fencing cattle out of streams at the district, and we do erosion and sediment control plan verifying in the office as well. Part of what we do is also education and outreach, so that's why I'm here tonight. Bear with me as I try to get through this. All right, so the soil and water conservation districts were established in the late 1930s. How many of you are familiar with the Dust Bowl? So when the clouds of dust finally made it to the East Coast in Washington, D.C., the legislators said, wait a minute, maybe we should do something. And what they did was the Soil Conservation Act, and that led to the creation of what was once one entity and what is now the National Resource Conservation Services, the NRCS, which is a federal branch, and the Soil Water Conservation District, which is a state branch. The aims of this act were to keep soil in place and improve water quality. So goals today are to have fishable, swimmable waters. Most of the issues are not caused by dust storms today, but are caused by stormwater. Stormwater is rainfall runoff flowing across a land surface. There's two issues when we talk about stormwater that are the driving factors. There's quality and there's quantity. So we want to reduce the quantity of stormwater runoff, and we want to increase the quality of stormwater runoff. That means reducing all that nasty stuff that comes off of our impervious surfaces, our roadways, sometimes even our rooftops. There's a lot of junk in there. So before we were here, without human interference, the land is a lot like a sponge. We have a lot of hardwood forests. Water is slowed by a leaf canopy, and then by all that leaf duff on the ground. And then the roots of those plants and trees reach really deep into the soil and help that water get good, deep infiltration. And when the water gets down there deep, it is filtered before it hits surface waterways, and it recharges our groundwater. So even with just a little bit of development, we're not getting that leaf canopy slowing down the rain. We're not getting that deep infiltration. And where we have soil exposed, it's easily picked up by fast-moving water and transported directly to surface water. When we alter the hydrology of the land, we lose that sponge effect. So here you see we've got 25% deep infiltration, 25% shallow infiltration. That is 50% of the water going down into the ground. When we have an urban environment, we're down to maybe 15%. And do please feel free to ask questions as we go through things. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with what this looks like. This is how we've been handling stormwater for years. It's pretty effective in that it just goes away. What we see a little less often is where it comes out. And this is a good looking outlet pipe. The problem with this is not only do we have all that water that's concentrated that can't get into the ground up top, once it gets into a stormwater system and into the pipes, it's just gathering velocity. If you have even grass to go over, you're slowing that water down a little bit. Once you're in a pipe, once you're on a road, it speeds up. So we see real impacts in our waterways. With less than 5% impervious cover, we have a very nice natural stream bed. There's not steep banks. There's a lot of what we call riffles, where the water it's not really a waterfall, but it kind of creates that effect. You'll see the water rushing over the top of rocks, maybe past some dead trees. This is all very natural ways to filter water. It creates little habitats for the macroinvertebrates that live there. When you get up to 10% impervious cover, you're starting to see some erosion on your stream banks. So that's not much impervious cover at all, but it has a big impact on those stream banks. And this is from your storm events, when that water's really moving fast. This is a picture of a stream in Charlottesville. You can see where that pipe is, sitting way above the water level. When that pipe was put in, it was in the base of the stream. This picture obviously has more debris. That can be from a storm. It can be somewhat natural, but again, notice the undercut and the steep banks. In this last picture on the slide, once you get into really, really urbanized environments, I think this is from Southern California, there's almost no point in trying to protect the soil, especially if you've got a sandy, easily erodible soil. So you just harden it. But that's probably not great for water quality. It's also not great for habitat. So the question is, what can we do as homeowners to improve our circumstances in our area and our water quality? Rain gardens are one of the things that we can do. It is considered green infrastructure. It is considered a best management practice by the state of Virginia. The EPA's definition of a rain garden is a depressed area in the landscape that collects rainwater from a roof, driveway, or street and allows it to soak into the ground. Planted with grasses and flowering perennials, we recommend natives. It can be cost-effective and a beautiful way to reduce runoff from leaving your property. What a rain garden is doing is capturing that water and letting it infiltrate into the ground before it moves on. Larger, more complex rain gardens are often called bioretention facilities or biofilters, and they're being used a lot now in place of a traditional stormwater pond in larger developments. So what we're mostly going to be talking about today is a residential lawn rain garden. These are very effective for small drainage areas. We recommend them to be under a ½ acre of square foot collection. It can be surface flow from roads, it can be surface flow from a hill, it can be captured directly from a downspout. Just briefly, I will show you all, there are some great rain garden designs that have been very useful in truly urban situations. Boxes on city streets, these go much deeper than you can see. You see the inlets from the sidewalks. This can really capture a whole lot of that street water and take it down into the ground, which when you have this much impervious surface is pretty important. Bioswales are another opportunity, often used in the medians and parking lots. So you see the one on the right is still soaking in that water. You can see the curb inlets again. And our bioretention facilities, these are our larger facilities, often in developments. They have a gravel bed underneath and often an overflow outlet pipe. These are things you won't see in a residential sized rain garden. So the components of a rain garden. We have a ponding area that goes up to about the level of the berm here. You have your soil fill, your filter bed, often an engineered soil media. The really important thing for this soil is that it can take in the water immediately. And in our area, that means no clay. So I know we all love our beautiful red clay soil, but if we don't have good infiltration rates in our soil, we're going to be removing some of that to put in an engineered mix that's high in sand, which is kind of the opposite of clay in regards to what soil does in taking in water. Some rain gardens have a stone layer underneath the fill dirt. This is in areas where there's really very, very poor soil, or in larger facilities like the bioretention that I mentioned. Most residential rain gardens do not have that component. Another component that's very important to the rain garden's functioning is the vegetation. And we'll get into that a bit more. We definitely recommend native plants, not only because they're suited to our wonderful clay soil, and they tend to grow very well in that with minimal fertilizers, which is one of our pollutants, and they can handle drought conditions as well. But the other great thing about natives is their roots are much deeper than non-natives. That means we're getting deeper infiltration. There's an easier path for water to get down into the soil. The vegetation in a rain garden is also going to take some of those pollutants like lawn fertilizer and things like that and process them and use them for plant growth. So there we are improving the quality of our stormwater and reducing the quantity. So this is a little diagram we put together in our office to show how a rain garden works. So you have your surface water that's going to flow down into the rain garden, and temporarily it will pond on the surface while it fills in. Then we're going to filter down through that soil media, often that engineered sandy mix. and you have a collection of water there. Their plants are uptaking nutrients from that water. They're uptaking water from that water. Some of it's making it down to the groundwater eventually. You've got your microorganisms in the soil also working for you through all this.
How deep are we talking?
It depends. Isn't that a great answer? Most rain gardens are, the depression that you see is no greater than 12 inches, 6 to 12 inches. What you need to excavate underneath depends on your infiltration rates of your soil. So the less your soil infiltrates, the more you want to dig to have more of a collection and storage area, giving your soil a chance to take it in. 18 inches for that soil media is something that's fairly standard. These are some numbers on the reductions that rain gardens can have. Pretty significant reduction of quantity and quality. So again, looking at the components of the rain garden, your water's coming in from an inflow. It can be from a gutter, it can be from a concentrated flow area. You have a ponding area. You see your soil mix below that ponding area. That soil mix is all holding water as well. It only starts to pond above where you can visually see in very heavy rain event. Your existing soil is below all that. You've got your vegetation, a nice thick layer of mulch underneath that vegetation, and most rain gardens will have a stable overflow route. In the event of 3 inches of rain in 2 hours, there will be overflow. There is nothing we can do physically to stop that much water. So choosing a location for a rain garden is the most challenging part of constructing a rain garden. We have some requirements and some restrictions, and especially when we're working on fairly small property lots, it can be a real challenge. So things that we need to be aware of. Do not put a rain garden any closer to your home than 10 feet. That is our recommendation. Let's get the water away from your house. Septic fields. I don't think that's a concern here at Lake Monticello, but if you are on your own septic system, those drain fields is what we're looking at. Collection box, not so much of an issue, but when you have those drain pipes, we're trying to get that water infiltrated. We don't need to add to it. Infiltration, I have said that word countless times already tonight. It is very, very important. Doing an infiltration test can be quite simple, and we're going to talk about how to do that. If you don't have adequate infiltration rates in your soil, you can't put a rain garden there. What you will do is create a mosquito pond. That is not what any of us want. Sloped hills, a challenge in this area of the state. We do need a somewhat flat area for a rain garden. You're essentially creating a little ponding area, and we don't want to build a pond on the side of the hill. That's not going to last in the long run. Putting water on a hill is how erosion problems start. Underground utilities need to be considered. Calling Miss Utility as you're planning a project, seeing where things lie. Sometimes county GIS websites have that information, not always totally accurate. Miss Utility is a great bet, and any knowledge from yourself installing things that are private or from previous homeowners is very important here. It's not fun to dig right into a cable line. Sizing of your rain garden is important as well, and this plays into the location as well, because you need to make sure you have enough space to put this. You can just say, I want to dig a hole this big and make it look good, and it will capture some water, and that is better than none. To meet best management practice specifications with the state, we need to be able to handle the runoff from a 1-inch storm, so it needs to be sized for that. To do that sizing, I have a little equation for you at the bottom here. The square foot footprint of a rain garden should be the square foot of the area to be captured, the drainage area, multiplied by a surface area coefficient for the 1-inch storm. Those are listed for impervious surface above and for pervious surface.
Is that calculation in this paperwork or no?
It is not. Usually the program I work with, I usually help folks size rain gardens, and getting in contact with me if you're interested, I'd be happy to do that with any of you. But then you divide it by the ponding depth in feet. So here you can play with your depth according to the amount of water that you're collecting. Do not create a ponding depth of more than 12 inches is the recommendation of the state here. If you have both impervious and pervious surfaces that you are collecting, so rooftop, driveway, and a lawn area, you want to do both of those calculations separately and then add the square footage at the end. The square footprint that you're getting is the actual ponding area. The sides will go up from there. So infiltration, again, a simple infiltration test as recommended by the Department of Forestry, and I think we have some of the Department of Forestry rain garden technical guides here today, is a little bit of work. You have to dig a 2-foot hole. That can be hard in this clay soil. But you dig that 2-foot hole, you get everything nice and wet and saturated, and then you pour 8 to 12 inches of water into that hole. And you wait and see how long it takes for it to go away. So, for example, if you had 8 inches of water in that 2-foot hole, 2 foot deep, not 2 foot wide, and it goes away in 12 hours, you have an infiltration rate of 0.67. So a rate that is higher than 0.5, and this is in inches per hour, is a wonderful infiltration rate. You can dig out a hole, loosen up your soil, put your soil back, and do a rain garden with no amended soil. When you have less than 0.5 inches in an hour, you're going to want to use a soil mix. You can do that yourself. You're looking at probably 25% topsoil, 25% compost, and 50% sand. A rate of less than 0.1 inches per hour, we need to be doing something else here. And some of this can be very site specific, and I'm not even talking about your property. I'm talking about that's where the truck parked when he was building your house, and the water just is not going to go in there, but it might 5 feet to the right. So getting to know your property is an important part of really any gardening practice, and a rain garden is a functioning garden bed. So to construct the rain garden, you've got sand, soil, mulch, plants. Again, emphasize use of native plants, not just for drought conditions, not just for that root depth, not just for their ease of maintenance, but also because they provide a lot to our native wildlife here. We're going to need the pollinators who eat the vegetation, who eat the nectar and the berries, to feed everybody else, all the way up to us. When you excavate a rain garden, it is important that you keep the edges level. If we're going to go on a slight slope, and you dig out the same depth all along the slope, you aren't going to hold much water. It's going to spill right out the end, okay? So we want to make sure that we're dealing with a level berm all the way around the footprint of that ponding area. This is a great illustration for that. The Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay is a terrific resource for what they call bayscaping, and that is any sort of landscaping that will help clean up the Chesapeake Bay. When you're excavating, well, before you're excavating, you do want to think about what you're going to do with any excess soil. Some of the excess soil can be used for the berm around the rain garden. That does need to be compacted pretty well as you go so it can hold all the water inside. But probably with our clay soils, not the best infiltration rates in the area, we're going to be looking at removing some of that and replacing it. So maybe your yard has some other low spots that you'd like to work to fill in. Things like that are good to think about in the planning process. 25% topsoil, 25% compost, 50% sand. Limiting the clay for that soil media in the ponding area of the rain garden is important. Larger engineered facilities often put a layer of a geotextile fabric that lets water through but not sediment particles at the bottom to keep things separated. Clay also tends to suck stone down into it, so the geotextile helps keep that from happening. And those larger facilities do use a lot of stone and clay layers in addition to the soil mix. If you're not interested in mixing soil yourself, there are several local companies that provide what they call a biomix or something like that, that's made specifically for some of these engineered facilities but can be used in residential gardens. Once you have your excavation and shaping complete, with the berms around the edges nicely compacted, then you get to plant. So we're going to get into planting in a little bit here. You have 3 different zones of planting for a rain garden. And the first thing that you're going to do as you start to have a finished rain garden is plant. Then you're going to put down mulch. We suggest in the first year that you do really thick mulch, 3 inches of mulch. It's going to mean that you don't have to do as much in the following years. It's going to hold moisture on those plants as they become established. Stone can also be used to stabilize targeted areas of the rain garden. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide because there's a great picture here of a rain garden that we helped install, and they have really nicely used stone in a strategic way. So the stone on the left is their inlet. It's coming from a downspout from their rooftop, and it cascades right through that stone down into the ponding area. Doesn't wash out any mulch or soil on its way. There is an overflow just in case we get a whole lot of rain in there that the rain garden can't handle. Instead of starting to just go over at all the edges, it will take that stable route. You also see an edging of stone at the edge of the driveway. This not only helps to slow that water that's coming really quickly, but it can create a nice boundary. If that stone was not there, we'd probably have a lot of that mulch washing off. Maintenance of a rain garden, because I know we all don't have enough chores to do. It's much like a garden. You're going to want to mulch it yearly. You're going to want to weed, especially when it's young. For the first year or 2, you're going to need to water during dry periods. Rain gardens can handle a lot of moisture. Things tend to stay moist in there. That doesn't mean that when we have 2 months with no rain, those plants aren't struggling too. Another thing to think about with rain gardens is their evolution over time. This rain garden in this photo was planted probably a year ago. A lot of these plants haven't come to their mature size yet. And some things are going to evolve as mature plants grow in a rain garden. If you have a shrub that's getting bigger, the things that were fine near it when it was young are going to struggle for sunlight as they grow. So same as with a garden, it's going to constantly be evolving. When you're planning your rain garden, you do need to think about your conditions just as you would with a garden bed. Do you have sun? Do you have partial shade? Do you have full shade? Full shade rain gardens are tough, but they can be done. You want to think about what kind of wildlife you'd like to attract to your yard. Do you want to have butterfly weed to pollinate? Bring the butterflies in? Would you rather feed birds berries? That can be planned for. What do you want to see? There's aesthetic considerations to be taken. Some of our native shrubs look rather shrubby. There are beautiful things that we have that attract hummingbirds. There are lower things, there are higher things. As I mentioned, you want to plan for the mature size of the plant. That way you're not planting a million things and then having half of them die in the long run. It's better to have it a little sparse at the beginning and let everything grow up. When I've been speaking about native plants and water quality, I always like to show this image. This is a federal image with the NRCS, and the little circled rectangle on the left is your lawn grass. So that really puts it into perspective with regard to getting water into the ground. I had someone ask me during a presentation a couple weeks ago, well, if it's all in grass, doesn't it go into the ground and it's just fine? Forget wildlife habitat, because lawns are not that. Look at what's happening below ground here. Rain gardens have 3 different zones for planting. They're treated differently because they receive different amounts of moisture. On the edges of your berms, you've got dry loving plants. These plants don't get any more rain than the surface would get normally. In zone 2 in the middle, on those side slopes, you're getting occasional standing water. So these plants need to be able to handle that. In the bottom, you want to have plants that can tolerate very wet conditions. I have some slides next showing some of the native plants that are options for these different zones in the rain garden. We have a lot of really beautiful natives. These are some of the smaller flowering guys that like a lot of wetness for their roots. How many of you knew that one of our irises is native? We have some native iris. Some of the larger plants that do well with wet feet. Cardinal flower I see growing along the sides of the river all the time. Swamp milkweed is great for butterflies. Our native hibiscus is a fun one, very showy. Another great thing about this native hibiscus is that it can handle salt. Sometimes, depending on where we put our rain gardens, especially if they're in a parking lot, we get a lot of salt in the wintertime, and that will kill a lot of plants. You've got to think about what's coming into the rain garden.
What kills plants in my yard are deer.
Right
down to the bone.
Yes, the comment is deer, and deer is a real consideration, and rain gardens are gardens. So you've got to think about that and plan for it. There are things that deer will not eat. There are fewer, you have to be more selective.
They're selective too.
Sometimes, but I've seen them eat everything.
Yes.
I've seen them eat hellebores here recently, which is...
Well, I have a lot, but
They haven't touched yours?
Touched them.
Good, hopefully they won't. We've got a lot of great native grasses. These are great for stabilization and getting deep, deep roots. They also provide habitat for wildlife through the winter when you leave them standing. We recommend cutting these grasses back in early March. Leaves habitat over the winter, but you're cutting it before anything might be nesting and reproducing in there. Some of the larger bushes and shrubs that do well with wet feet. Elderberry is great for attracting birds. The fruits are pretty tasty to eat. For the wet but not soaking area on the side slopes of our rain garden, these are a lot of little lovely woodland type plants that do well here. Our Virginia bluebells are very popular. Wild ginger also does well here. Do y'all know wild ginger? It's a good deer resistant one. We have a lot of lovely ferns that do well in all different conditions. And ferns are good for our shade gardens. River oats, one of my favorite native grasses. It's hard to convey in a picture how neat those flowers are. Larger shrubs for that side slope area, silky dogwood, serviceberry, possumhaw, viburnum, all great for pollinators. Good bird habitat. Inkberry holly, false indigo. We even have native blueberries. Everything loves a blueberry. Zone 3, our drier area, can be a little bit tougher, especially if you're in the shade, but we've got some good wildflowers. Our native rudbeckia is the cutleaf coneflower, quite cheery in the summer into the fall. Goldenrod is a nice one that tends to naturalize itself and come up more and more. Little bluestem is a very attractive grass. Joe pie weed, excellent for pollinators. I actually just recently learned, a lot of our natives have a lot of history behind them. Joe pie weed is named after an Indian healer who used to use it to cure fevers, so his name was Joe pie. Again, that dry area, American beautyberry, another one of our viburnums. And our larger rain gardens can actually handle a tree or two if you wanted to have that as part of your aesthetic. Having different layers for wildlife is great to encourage different varieties to come in. So we've got choke cherry trees, which are beautiful, pawpaws. So you have any questions for me about rain gardens, their function, how they work, their installation? No? All right, well, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, which is our urban program with the Thomas Jefferson Soil Water Conservation District. The Virginia Conservation Assistance Program is only about 4 years old, and it's been growing in popularity. We are trying to give landowners and homeowners options for stormwater management and cost share funds. Okay, we're working to give you incentive payments to improve the quality and quantity of your stormwater. We can do all sorts of different practices with this program. We do stick to the recognized state best management practices, those BMPs. So one of those is rain gardens. We can also do the larger bioretention facilities if your property is in need of that. We do permeable pavement systems. This is not just the crisscross concrete pavers with grass growing in between them. These systems have deep gravel reservoirs underneath that can handle massive amounts of stormwater. There's videos of dump trucks dumping loads of water that just go right in. It's really neat. And they look beautiful. We can do rainwater harvesting systems, so we can collect rainwater from rooftops and gutters and help you harvest that for use in the garden or for other uses. If you can dream them up, we can work with you on them. We do native plantings. So this runs from native tree plantings in areas that need to soak up more water to poorly vegetated area that we can convert to native meadow. We have the accidental benefit of really helping out a lot of pollinators with some of these practices. We can do various stormwater conveyance practices as well. So if you have an area where water's really rushing through, we can maybe slow it down and give it a chance to settle some on the way there. To apply for funding for this program in this area, you would talk with me. Often a site visit is the first step. I can come, look at your space, look at your problem areas, and speak to you about what might be the best solution. It's not always exactly what you want it to be, but we can talk and be fluid about that. So coming up with a site plan, a design, and a cost estimate. If it includes plants, we do need to see a species list. And there are 2 simple application documents. Once that's all together, we can hold that application, and as soon as funding is available, those applications are reviewed according to their rank. So we rank according to water quality benefit potential. Any questions about the VCAP program?
Well, how much, give us a range of from a small to maybe a medium size we might have here in Lake Monticello. What are we talking for cost?
That's a great question. The question is cost for small to medium rain garden. And again, my answer is going to be it depends. Because it's going to depend on if you want to do a lot of the work yourself, if you're going to hire everything out, how deep are you going to dig. Excavation is expensive if you're hiring that out. Most of the rain gardens that I've helped install have been in the $800 to $3,500 range.
Does that include plants?
Yes, and mulch. But it depends on how you play it. You know, if you call in the guy to come do it and he designs the plan for you, it's going to be on the higher end, certainly. Our cost share programs vary depending practice to practice, but for example, a rain garden practice can be cost shared at a rate of 75% of eligible costs with a maximum payment of $3,500. So, pretty good incentive there. One other thing that we do at my district office is we do sell rain barrels. So these are much smaller systems than the VCAP program handles. These are usually 50 gallons. They come with everything included, and I'd be happy to connect any of you interested with Lauriston at our office who sells those.
How much are they?
They are $75 from our office, and that comes with everything that you need to just cut your downspout and put it right there. some resources that I have up here for you today, and I'll be happy to get anything to you by email. If you all saw the little sign-in list over on the table, if you do put your email on there, I'll send you a thank you email and make it real easy for you to get back with me. The Flora of Virginia book is a great resource for native plants. It's kind of the VCAP program's guidebook. If it's in there, you're okay to plant it under our program. There's also a Virginia Native Plant Society that has chapters around the areas that we live in. The Albemarle County Native Plant Database, for those of you who aren't familiar, is an internet tool that showcases native plants from the area according to your site specifications. So when you look it up, you can plug in all the different things that you have, all the different things that you want, and it comes up with some answers for you. That's a really great tool. There is also a short, great book called the Piedmont Native Plant Guide that was put together by several local individuals, and my office was a partner in that. We do have those books for sale for $10 each at our office, and it's a really great, easy way to get to learn some of the more prolific natives and all of their site requirements. The VCAP website is a great resource as far as looking at the specifications for rain gardens. DEQ BMP specifications are the real kicker, but they are hard to get through. It can be 45 pages long, and it's very technical. So, for a homeowner, my favorite rain garden technical guide that there are copies of here today is the Virginia Department of Forestry Guide. And that can be found online at the address in this presentation as well, in physical copies. And so I have my contact information here for you all. I have a few cards on the table. If you want to sign that sign-in sheet with your email, I will get to you that way. Is there anything else y'all are interested in today?
Is there someone in your office at all times? During normal work hours?
During normal work hours, unless there is, I think there's one board meeting in December that we have off-site. But generally speaking, yes, there's always someone there. Yes?
If I just wanted to build a slowing the water running down the slope, would you recommend I put down pea gravel, hard rock, big rock? Do I put logs underneath it? I need to slow the water running down the slope.
Okay, is it concentrated or is it sheet flow over the surface of your water?
Sheet flow over the surface.
Sure, so to slow water coming over a slope, it's going to depend on how broadly it's spread. There's a device called a level spreader, which functions to kind of, it's basically a long berm, and it kind of slows the water and lets it go over slowly. There's things like that you can do if you have the water coming to a hill and then cascading down. My personal recommendation would be to create some sort of filter strip at the top where you do like a mulched bed planting of some of these native grasses and things like that. That's going to not only slow the water down but also get it down into the ground and get rid of some of it. Rock can be used. Pea gravel is going to go away. It's going to disappear. That's going to be again and again and again and again, which as a homeowner is probably not the solution that you want. Big rocks can work pretty well if it's a pretty concentrated flow. If it's a wide area, it's very site specific without seeing it. I don't know what the best recommendation is, but I can tell you that our clay soils that aren't well vegetated tend to eat that rock. They let it soak down in and it's gone before you know it. Part of what we do at our office is come to site visits to areas with concerns and talk to you about what might be a solution. And if it's something simple that you can do, great. If it's something bigger that maybe we can help you pay for, great.
We have quite a bit of trees in the lake.
Leaving leaves where they are, taking the leaves, what about that?
So leaving leaves where they are is going to be the best thing that you can do for wildlife habitat for soil regeneration, and it creates another layer of protection for the soil against running off. So if things are channelized, obviously the leaves aren't going to stay there and do too much. But if you can have a forested area that you leave the leaf litter, that's going to benefit the environment as a whole.
Will that not breed mosquitoes on the bottom layer of the leaves? You know, as they pile up in the forest and then
My
dry
understanding.
out the bottom?
My understanding about mosquitoes is that they actually need like a little pond or water that they can swim around in, the larva. And the leaves at the bottom should not provide that much unless there's an area that is not drying out.
Yes, that's it.
I mean like if there's like a hole that doesn't take water into the ground. If it's an area that ponds water, whether there's leaves there or not. It's not my experience that leaves themselves will breed mosquitoes. It's little things around your yard that collect water that do that, and all it takes is a little coffee mug left out.
Another thought about the leaves. Around here, a lot of our trees are oaks, and my understanding is that oak leaves are among the best in terms of just a natural mulch. You know, something about their shape just makes them a really good mulch cover. So for people who want to just leave the leaves.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you're worried about them collecting water or not degrading fast enough, or if you think it's somewhat unsightly, you can have folks come out and chip up those leaves. They've got these little, I don't know what they call them, but they mulch the leaves, and that's going to prevent any potential cupping of the leaves to hold water, and it's going to help them turn into soil a whole lot faster.
Yeah, I actually have a York's mulcher. I'm going to go home and use that now. That's what I do. I just leaf mulch all around because I got a ton of leaves. So
Excellent.
Somebody got to do that.
So leaf mulch will create the soil conditions that would naturally be under that tree is the only thing. So if you're trying to do a bunch of ornamental gardening, it may not be the best for that.
The concern with the leaves has been that they end up running down and getting in the coves and in the lake, and that that creates a whole different set of problems when it's filled in. It's filled in.
So I think filling in is more of an issue with sediment than it is with leaf litter. There are these areas that we have, especially here at Lake Monticello, that are really highly channelized and all the stormwater goes through it when it rains. That's where you should clear leaves out. Does that make sense? Those are the leaves that are making it into the lake. So if you can target your leaf collection and cleanup to be out of those channels, but on the surfaces so that sediment from the surface doesn't get into those channels, and then the leaves aren't clogging up the channels. Yes.
When you're excavating through the clay, are you generally trying to excavate through the bottom of the clay so you get to whatever's below that?
No.
And is there an average of how thick the clay is around here? A foot, 2 feet, 10 feet?
So is there an average of how thick the clay is in the area here? Do you get below the clay in excavating for a rain garden is the question. No, most all of the soil that we have here is clay. You're not going to get through it until you hit bedrock. You do not want to hit bedrock for a rain garden because we want to infiltrate. I don't know about the levels of bedrock at Lake Monticello. They vary in this region pretty drastically depending on how close you are to mountains, depending on different veins of rock. But generally speaking, I haven't run into any excavation problems in the area unless you see a big piece of bedrock poking out of the ground over here and say, I want to dig 10 feet over. That's probably not going to work. And thank you all so much for coming to the presentation today, and thank you to the Wildlife Group for having me.